Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
I'm excited to talk today about a topic that's on the tip of everyone's tongue, whether you're in the print and mail industry or whether you're outside the industry dealing with other cyber issues, and that is cybersecurity, both on the prevention side as well as on the response side. And I'm really happy to introduce Waleed Haddad, who's the president of Naya Group. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. Look forward to our discussion today.
Oh, it's great. And as I said, and I wasn't exaggerating, cybersecurity, I think, impacts virtually every industry that you deal with, that we deal with, in our work, because everyone's online. I mean, it's that simple. But particularly in the printing and mailing industry, where folks are handling wide-ranging types of data, especially personally identifiable information, PII, or personal health information, PHI. So I'd love to introduce Naya Group a bit and hit some of the topics that folks are talking about in our world. So take it away and tell us a little bit about Naya Group and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So Naya Group is a predominant MSP and MSSP organization. We focus heavily on hybrid and cloud infrastructures, focusing primarily into Microsoft and Azure. And we look to help organizations. We have several print and mail customers currently in our portfolio that we assist in kind of performing a defense in depth strategy, kind of a preventative go-to action, right, to protect their infrastructures from any potential threats, knowing that the type of data that they're holding, maintaining, processing, transacting, to ensure that that they can maintain operations. What we've seen, in the last few years, well, a little bit longer than that, but what we see is, the original attacks were looking for credit card information, social security numbers, attempting to try to get clients to, get some financial gain from directly. And there was a little bit of, obtaining enough information on a user that they can go up with credit cards, try to open up credit lines, and kind of get that type of financial gain. Lately, the new strategy is ransom attacks, right? What we're seeing is threat actors going after organizations and crippling their businesses. And what they do is once they exploit, their infrastructure, their ecosystem, is they don't steal anything particularly. What they're trying to do is bring an organization to its knees so it can't operate. And, the customer ends up not meeting SLAs, not meeting their contractual agreements because they're sitting there dealing with some type of incident that takes days, weeks, months sometimes to remediate and get back up. And a lot of the attacks that we're seeing lately are very sophisticated. They're no longer like script kiddies or, some newbie to the hacking game trying to get in. What we're seeing significantly is the biggest reason we're seeing the predominance of these skilled threat actors is they know what to go after. And a lot of these organizations that we've been working with, their backups are being attacked first. And that is kind of like the end all be all if they can't get back up and running, right? We know threat actors try to get in there, they do their ransom attack, encrypt these machines, try to exfiltrate data, and threaten to post and release the data that they've received unless they get this ransom and this financial gain out of this organization. And just in the last 3 months, we've been working with vendors of our customers who have had to actually pay the ransom, right? Because the attack and the sophistication of the attack focused not only on getting and breaking down the day-to-day operations of the organization, but making sure that they can't get back up, right? And that's where their backups are. They're mutable backups, their daily backups, their weekly backups. And when we see that, we know that it wasn't some, attack that just happened in real time. Oftentimes, these threat actors are sitting in these organizations for days, weeks, months before they actually attack, right? And they're sending little bits of information back to their systems, to themselves, to know where things are going, right? They start learning where their backups are, learning what critical servers are there, because it takes time to actually encrypt a system, right? So what they're seeing is these individuals, these threat actors, are going after the backups first, right? And there's no alerting, there's no tripwires, there's no layered defense there to set off some alarms specifically for backups. People think, oh, we have backups, they're certain miles away, we should be good, right? Even if we get attacked. But it's no longer the case. There's a number of critical steps and processes that need to occur that we help organizations make sure that they're in play so that, worst case scenario, nothing's 100% secure, but that at least we can recover with some level of security, some level of, continuity there.
Yeah, so prevention really is maybe the first step in that process to be prepared, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've been doing is working with organizations from a people, processes, and technology standpoint, right? So we create a defense in depth. You have that layered defense, and then you have layered security, and then you have defense in depth. Layered security focuses on, putting multiple security layers into one aspect. For example, your identity, right? Not only do you have a username and password, but MFA, multi-factor authentication, has been a big push in the past few years, especially with cyber insurance, right? And if you don't have multi-factor authentication enabled, your premiums are significant, right? But not only that, that's what a layered security looks like. Defense in depth kind of takes a holistic approach where, we're building enough tripwires within the organization that some bells and whistles should go off should a threat actor be able to gain access. But most importantly, the one thing that I focus heavily on with our teams or with our customers is, the largest vector of entry. I believe KnowBe4 just released an article that said about 94% of attacks occur from phishing, social engineering, some type of user, communication. And what we focus heavily first and foremost is getting the end user trained, right? The 94% of attacks happen through the vector of phishing, social engineering of some sort. MGM is a prime example, right? It was a phone call to a low-level help desk that created reset passwords, and it kind of just escalated from there. And as sophisticated and unlimited funding that a casino may have, an organization like MGM, it was still quite significant, down for weeks, right? There wasn't enough detail on what actually was taken or stolen, but it brought that business to its knees for quite some time, from the hotel to casino management to the floors to day-to-day operations, and what that cost looked like. And reputationally, it's damaging, right? They had to notify their customers, their hotel guests, that type of information was exfiltrated.
Yeah, the cost to an organization, it takes so many different forms, or has so many different layers, as you say. It's the profits you earn on each day you're down, or each hour you're down, the reputational damage that you really can't fully appreciate or estimate, and then the cost of remediation is huge, right? And
Yeah.
not all of it's insured. Even if you've got the most robust cybersecurity policy out there, not all of that work is going to be covered. There might be some other insurance policies. Maybe you've got coverage for your operation being down. But again, if it's a cyber incident, I think you may be limited as to what you can recover. So the prevention, I think, is certainly the best part of the solution.
And those go hand in hand, right? If cyber insurance, the firm does not want to pay out, so they're looking for any reason, right? Negligence, right? So if you don't do due care or due diligence and demonstrate that you've put in the effort, that you have a significant security posture, they have all the reason. And for one of our publicly traded companies that we work with, not only the premiums there, the caps there are roughly around $10 million for a $1.5 billion organization. But if the attack is significant enough, how many days are they down if their operations are roughly around $2 million a day in revenue? So you have 5 days there, right, before you cap out. So absolutely. So the important part is having a plan in place before. And it's unfortunate. And the thing I wanted to bring up too is what we're seeing is, we reach out to a lot of our customers and people that we haven't quite met yet, that prospects, I should say, and saying, look, majority of the customers that we've received today are either based on two reasons: incident or an audit. right? They've had an incident and they call us in to help them fix and remediate that issue. Or they have an audit, whether it's regulatory based on some government agency that says, okay, now you must meet these compliances. Or, their customers saying, hey, we need a SOC 2 Type 2 report, or we need some ISO 27001 or 27002 certification or compliance report that shows that you have the proper measures in place that we can send you our data, because it's a trickle down effect, right? If we do business, there's dependencies with vendors that they must maintain at least a bare minimum of the security posture that first party is holding or better.
And yeah, I mean, and again, that's part of the preparation for sure. What are some of the other things you think about for, let's say, a print mail customer that's going to be handling PHI, for example? Some of the certifications that they look at, SOC 2 being one of them. What are some of the things you can do to be especially attentive to the PHI issue and making sure that outside actors don't get access to it?
Yeah, so we do it like an outside in approach. We focus on perimeter security first, right? Look for that low hanging fruit. We have, one thing that we really pride ourselves on is our red team. We have a red team that does penetration testing from the outside in. Recently, we were working with an organization that in the past years, it was a local municipality government that had penetration tests performed for them by significant other vendors, right? Quite predominant in the industry, even I would say top tier, definitely. And they did it for the last 3 years, and the reports came back good, right? They if there was any minor or medium findings, they would remediate those, but there was never any critical or high. We had the opportunity in one this year's bid to do some penetration tests from the outside in, and we were able to find a vulnerability that they had not seen, because we knew it existed since 2017. And there was no real patch for it. There was no real fix that was sent out by the OEM or the appliance that was in play. It was a script that needed to be pushed, and some configurations on the system itself to be configured properly. And unfortunately, it was a critical finding that allowed us into the infrastructure and maintain entire control of their organization. Now, thank goodness it was us and not some bad actor out there, but that's the whole purpose, right? We take that outside in approach. And what we've been seeing is a lot of organizations are doing is strictly just external penetration testing. And I find that to be not the full gamut of what's necessary. The objective is to do both external, internal, and web application. Because what we have to assume is that if we all can agree in our industry that nothing's 100% secure, then we have to assume that at some point someone's going to get in. Okay, fine. We understand that. If the opportunity exists and someone is on the inside, what can they actually do, right? If there's a standard employee or there's an admin, what can they actually get into that will, how can they laterally move within the ad organization, and how much damage can they do? Because the first thing of a threat actor, once he gets in, more often than not, they're getting a standard user's account, right? Not some IT security professional or an admin that has elevated privileges. They're getting some standard user's account, and they're in there and they're listening, watching the traffic on the inside, on the internal environment. What can they do then, right? Can they laterally move? Can they exploit another admin account to be able to get privileges that allow them to do more than necessary? And that's what we test, right? We really go onto the inside and say, okay, give us a box on the inside of your environment and let us see what we can see on the east-west traffic. Let us see if your information is not encrypted through the line. Let me see if I can gather some admin privileges that has more permissions than necessary. You did not implement these privilege methodology inside your infrastructure. So now, not only did I get John's account, but I also got Henry, Steve, and Tim from IT, right? And they have accounts that can control the entire infrastructure, the keys to the kingdom. And what we do is a lot of these organizations have a flat network, right? There's not a very, what we look to build is a vertical network so that we not need to talk to IT from a technological standpoint, right? There might be communications through Teams or email, things like that. That's one thing. But there's no reason someone in marketing should have access to the critical servers, all the critical servers in IT. So we build, segmentation within that organization to ensure that whatever that user needs is all they have, right? And that's the strategy there, is we make sure that if someone got in, there's limited damage, right? We know that it's inevitable. Second thing we do is we put enough tripwires in there that some alarm needs to go off, right? Something needs to go there. Yes, you might got past our AV. Okay, great. Well, we should have alerts and configuration set that if some user goes to a box that he's never been to before, tries to remote in, we should get notified. Whether it's a false positive or a true, we need to know, right? And if it's allowed access, great, we'll allow them in, right? But if it's not, at least we're notified and can take course of action quite quickly.
Yeah, that's the key, really, is the knowledge. And I think uh, maybe continuing this theme, hopefully it makes some sense. Knowledge about what the threat is, I think, is super important. I remember reading, I don't remember the percentage, but it was an overwhelming percentage of intrusions really come from um, they come from access to individual accounts, as you were saying. So what are some of the things that you've worked with your clients to do training, or to do what, to take other measures to really elevate the knowledge level among the employee population to what the threats are?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I kind of veered off on my thought process there. Security awareness and training, it is significant. A lot of people, a lot of organizations purchase subscriptions to something like KnowBe4, where they send out these, test phishing emails to see what their phish prone rate is. How often are people clicking on malicious emails? How often are users just clicking or adding their credentials because some social engineering said, hey, we need to change your password to something. Not only do we perform those tests for organizations, but we really push for live training. When we can get into an organization and perform, some type of, in-person or virtual training that allows them for a back and forth dialogue, it really opens up the user's mind and to really understand what a brute force attack is, how easy it is to break a password, right? They don't really need your password, and how that technology actually works with these threat actors. They think it's somebody behind a computer, just typing away and hoping to guess that password, when it's really a bot. It's a form of technology that's there, that's pounding away at the system until it finds the password that's used, right, to break in. And not only does it open up the eyes of the end user, but what they end up doing is they end up taking all the things they've learned in this training class and they apply it to their children at home or their personal lives. And it really becomes like second nature. And then you get buy-in. I can tell you, one of our print and mail organizations I've been working with for close to about 7 years now. And we did a 3-month session course where we did, morning shift and night shift training in person. And I can tell you that when we saw the original social engineering attempts that we'd started with was in the double digits, high 25% would click on emails with just a simple phishing email. And we were able to bring it down below 9% within just a few months, because people bought in, they understood, and they got, I don't want to say scared, but they were aware, right? They knew what these threat actors had the capabilities of doing. And one of the things that you see in phishing emails that we always tell people is you'll see grammatical errors, misspellings. You'll see a sense of urgency. Hey, send me this gift card. I need it. I'm the president of the company and I'm stuck in Mexico. Make sure you get this gift card out to so and so before this time. Or links that are, you can tell just by hovering over them, are malicious in nature. With AI, it's become much more sophisticated. That those old theories really don't exist very much anymore, because these threat actors are usually typically international. That's where the grammatical errors, the misspellings come in. With AI, they're building much more custom, much more sophisticated phishing emails, right? And the number one thing that we try to harp on is you'll never hear IT, or anybody from that matter, Verizon or Sprint, call you and ask you for your username and password. There'll never be a time where an email should come in and say, hey, go change your password. It'll tell you your password may expire, go reset it, but never to enter your credentials, right? There'll be multi-steps to the reset process. And, that's the things we try to harp on, enforce. And when you have an organization with, hundreds of employees, every one of those employees is a vector of entry. right? They all have email addresses, they all have accounts, they all have, username and passwords to your systems. How far can those people go?
Yeah, it's true. I guess that's one of the negatives about AI is that all of a sudden it equalizes the some of these factors that were the easy way to pick out the malicious emails, right?
Yeah,
You could smell them a mile away. Now you can't smell them a mile away anymore because they look pretty
no,
legit.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, AI has its pros and cons. There's a lot to be leveraged in a positive manner for organizations, especially with security, right? We are leveraging AI at a much higher pace than I think most organizations, where it can analyze and detect threats much faster than in the past. And the reports and the root cause analysis that we can generate from an AI technology built in to an ecosystem like Microsoft or Azure, it's remarkable. We can put together executive reports within a couple of hours just by doing implementing AI in the right locations. And it flags them, it turns it off. We can set it to, hey, even if you suspect something at this level, this caliber, turn it off no matter what. Even if it's something that's legitimate, turn it off. Let us know. Let us make that final decision, where there has to be some um, compromise between technology and human intervention.
You know what? I love the story you told just a little while ago in this recording about how you were able to find that vulnerability with your client that had been missed by some of the bigger firms. I always like the where the somebody beats the big boys, so to speak, and does something special for their clients. You know, what are some of the other things that Naya Group does that you would say would be a distinction between the type of more personalized and more strategic services that you do versus some of the big competitors?
Yeah, and that's one thing I've been focusing heavily on in our organization is one, the personal touch, a customizable um, resilience program. All right. What I've been dealing with over the past few years when I work with other MSSPs is you have to stay in their boundaries. They will do this and this for you alone. If it's incident response, they do incident response. If they handle, your endpoint detection and response for EDR, then that's what they handle. That there's no veering out. And to me, that's just a method that's no long. It's not going to exist for longer because with AI, it's adaptive. It's moving forward so fast, and you have to be able to understand each one of your customers' operations, their needs, the regulatory requirements, and be able to customize your delivery of your security defense layers to that organization, because it's a balancing act between operations and security. You don't want to put so much security in that you're halting operations, right? You want to be able to have a balancing act there. And number two, the biggest thing I think that helps us, impress our clients is speed, how fast we can deploy not only an infrastructure, but respond to an incident. We have 24 by 7 monitoring. So we're here day and night because threat actors, majority of the time, anybody that's done incident response will tell you Friday, Saturday, Sunday, holidays are the days they attack, the days the lowest amount of people are in the office. People are not monitoring and watching the systems, off vacationing. Those are the times they attack. I can't tell you how many times I've been out on a Friday evening with the family or, on the golf course, and I get that call. You have to drop everything you're doing, engage your team, and get in front of the screens and monitors to begin deploying. And the problem is if you're not doing this proactively, then it becomes much more complex situation, because then you have to get in their environment and start deploying these tools on systems that are already compromised. And it's very difficult to do so, right? You have to find a way to get into each one of those systems and deploy the tools to be able to get eyes inside these infrastructure. And once you're at that point, it's much more difficult to recover. That's why I always, press the people that we meet with, like, look, you might not think you need this now, but I can't tell you how many people I've sat across the table with this. I don't need this now. And by some miracle, my business card or my email was there and we were in front of them when an incident did occur. And that's how we built our relationships. I'd rather build the relationships on a positive note than a note of, unfortunate situations, circumstances. So the two things that we really, emphasize ourselves on is customizing our cyber resilience program and speed. I'll tell you about a customer that just deployed almost a $750,000 infrastructure, a brand new infrastructure in the print and mail industry, actually. And their IT team was forecasting that it would take about to Q3 or Q4 of 2024 to complete the stand up and implementation of the new technology. And we ended up buying and receiving the products early January of 2024. And when they called us in to assist and help them stand up the infrastructure and migrate their current technology to the new technology, we were done in less than 3 months. So I would call it early Q2. We were done and meeting that requirement. Speed for us is a big factor. We feel like whatever can be done, let's do it now and as quickly as possible.
And you know what I think is good to note, at least that's what we see among our clients, is that this idea that if you hire the big firms, that you're going to be fine and that you're sort of covered, or at least your butt's covered. That classic saying, you can't get fired for hiring IBM. I don't know. I don't think that's really true anymore, because if you hire the big firm and they still make the mistake and you're still out of business because you didn't prepare, I think you're in just as bad a situation, if not worse, because you probably spent the fortune that you didn't need to spend, and you didn't get what you pay for.
Well, I mean, you hit it on the nose, right? I think that these bigger firms are looking for clients to fit their mold instead of these MSSP fitting their client's mold. And that's the thing, right? They have what they do it well, and it's not their fault at the end of the day. They did what they had to do. They focused on these things, but they didn't look at these other vectors of entry. They didn't look at these other vectors of potential compromise. And that's the big firms, I can tell you that we even leverage for our customers some of these big firms for specific items, specific functions and tools, where they may have a house, organization that does international sun up, sun down monitoring, where it's very specific on things that we need and very specific ecosystems. But to me, I think the smaller firms give bigger organizations a much more leveraged position and a much stronger security posture, because they're looking at how can we help this organization so that we can not only protect them, but protect our reputation, build our reputation. And these firms, the ones that do really well, focus on one thing and one thing only, the blue ocean, red ocean strategy. I love that. And that's great if they do it well, but it's not going to be the end all be all. I mean, just look at MGM. I mean, how many of the big boys did they have inside of their infrastructure? And still, yet here we are, right? Even if it was a social engineering, a big global international organization just recently, CDK Global, right? A manufacturing international organization. We know, we work with them from a vendor relationship on what their security posture looks like. They ended up paying a significant ransom, right? Not only was there reputational damage, but a lot of our customers had to sever the ties between the communications between us and them to make sure that we weren't a threat, or at risk, I should say, right? That the threat wasn't something that could be leveraged into us, whether it was a VPN connection or a tunnel or email communication, right? An email coming from them now is no longer significant. Like, we had to take concern. We had to shut off quarantine all emails coming in, because if the threat actor had access to their systems, then they could potentially act as them at any given time and send us an email that has, threats within it. So yeah, the big boys, they do things well. CrowdStrike, you have Harvard's Group, you have a lot of these big MSPs, you have Blue Voyant, but they do it well, but they focus on very specific elements inside the security. And you need a robust, right? I'm not saying not to use them, but use them for what they're good at, and leverage the more private firms to give you that real overall insight to look at all things that matter to you, especially protecting your data when it comes to PHI or PII. When I first started my career, I worked for a print and mail organization, and we held 360 million identities, right? And my boss at the time was a brilliant manager, and he emphasized defense in depth over and over again, that it didn't matter how good we were. What mattered the most was that we had enough things in place that something would be triggered at some point that we could take action quickly. And then backups. I can't emphasize the importance of backups and how to properly protect them. We're Naya Group, really, like when we start, we focus on the three things: external, from the outside in, security and awareness training with the users, and defense in depth, right? How do we get to those three things as quickly as humanly possible?
That's great advice, Waleed. One last thing I wanted to cover, because I think it might give people some, some good takeaways from listening to this podcast episode. You know, if they're unfortunately subject to an attack and they're shut down or they're somehow impacted in a significant way, what's the roadmap besides calling you and your team to get them involved? What are some of the things they can do to protect themselves or at least minimize the impact as best they can right at the time the incident gets discovered?
Yeah, a lot of people would say shut down a system, turn it off, but that is not the way to go. The objective is to disconnect from the internet. Stop allowing traffic to go back and forth between your organization, your infrastructure, and the threat actor. Because you want to do forensics, and there's information set in the RAM that if you shut off that system, you lose it forever, right? At some point, depending on the scale of the attack, you want that information. You want to know how they got in so that you can fix it, right? Because if you don't know the vector of entry or who patient zero is, you're subject to be another victim to these threat actors because you did not fix the problem and how they got in. So the number one thing is try to find where and how they got in. Where did this start? Where did get on your tools, start investigating where this became from. If you have a policy or a playbook or a plan, a security incident response plan, and hopefully it's been tested through either a tabletop or in a live testing, that you pull it out and follow the steps, because everybody's frantic. Everybody's scared. Everybody's like, my job, I'm going to lose my job. Our company is going to be in the newspaper, whatever it may be. And it's, you have to slow down, take a deep breath, and getting somebody from the outside is important because they're looking at it from a different lens than the people internally that are facing this problem. We are not looking to point fingers and hurt anybody or get them to, get fired. That is never the objective. It happens. It happens to the best of the best. The objective is to find the root cause, sever it, fix it, and bring things back up as quickly as possible.
Indeed. That's great advice for sure. Waleed, this has been a super valuable piece. I'm sure we could go on for another hour. We probably should actually maybe break it into pieces, but
Yeah.
we don't want to spoil all the surprises that folks can take advantage of. But what I'd really like them to do is reach out to you for just a discussion about what the landscape looks like and what are the threats they face, maybe a needs assessment. What's the best way for them to reach out to you to have that and have that conversation and continue from where we left off today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an 888 number, toll-free number on our website. We have our contact us page on NayaGroupLLC.com as well. Or feel free to reach out to us at SEC, so Sam, Eric, Charlie, at NayaGroupLLC.com as well. Feel free through you too, Chris. We'd love to, we're looking forward to working with you in the future. And if they ever need anything and they know you directly, feel free to put us in contact with them. We're here. We're, heavily into pushing our services to organizations that are in need. And we've been fortunate enough that, print and mail has been a big advocate, and we've proven ourselves in that realm. And we'll probably be at more and more conferences here coming up in the near future. And feel free to reach out to us anytime. We really want to help.
Fantastic. Well, Waleed, thank you so much for sharing all that valuable information today, and hopefully putting people on a better footing to maybe prevent some of these events and certainly minimize the impact of the ones they get involved in. So just to sum it up for today, we had a great conversation with Waleed Haddad, who's the president of the Naya Group. And again, thank you, Waleed, for all that great info. And this is Chris Santomassimo from OGC Solutions, the sponsor of the Think Factory podcast. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Chris.